To this meeting of the Morgan Building Committee and bring the meeting to order. I'd like to cover a couple of ground rules and give everybody a heads up on what's happening this evening. We're going to have a presentation from David Thompson. He's going to have Matt Kennedy here from ECS. He's going to talk to us a little bit about his environmental assessment. We have Wade Thomas here as well. He's going to talk to us about some of the site work that he's done. And then David and Bob will go over some of the cost estimates that they have for us. I'd like to thank everybody for coming this evening and explain a little bit about our committee. We're holding this meeting in public, but it is a meeting where we as building committee members will ask questions, but we won't be taking questions from the audience during the course of the meeting. We will, however, be glad to spend time with anybody that has questions after the meeting is over, as long as our meeting gets over at a decent hour. The next order of business is a bill we've received from David Thompson Architects. We as a building committee have to approve the bill, and then we send it on to Willie to have it paid. Emailed everybody a copy of it. If anyone has any questions about it, now would be the time to ask.
My email.
Yeah, we have copies for you.
Yeah, that's on today, but I'll just roughly look at it.
I was hoping I'd get a check before we go on with the meeting.
We're good.
Correct.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion about the bill? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No abstentions? Thank you. I think we're up to you now, David.
So, in the interest of conserving the time of our two outside consultants who may choose not to stay through the entirety of the meeting, we'll start with them. But just let me refresh your memory here. Our charge this evening is to review the cost estimate and the process that we've been going through since we last met, is to share with Bob Lynn and Gilbane and his folks in their estimating department the plans that have been developed to date. I think we had broad understanding that we had more or less the right scheme in mind when we last presented to you in terms of program and site development, that sort of thing. One of the things of concern to the committee was that our square footage was higher than what we had anticipated. And so what I had counseled in terms of the process is that let's proceed ahead with the cost estimate, see where we are based on that square footage, and if the results are not considered favorable, then we'll go back and see what opportunities there may be for cost estimate for square footage reduction. And the early results we were getting back from Gilbane were telling us that our numbers were high. So we thought in the interest of having this meeting be as productive as possible, we would unilaterally move right into that effort of trying to reduce the overall square footage of the building. So we had done that, and I'll talk about that in more detail as we go on. But in round numbers, I think previously we had talked about the gross square footage of the overall square footage of the building being 135,000 square feet. We've reduced it now, that number down significantly. Again, I'm not going to go into all the details of the numbers just yet. We'll do that a little bit later. But there has been significant effort in doing so. And in shorthand, I'll also say that we're able to do that without significant compromises in program area. And I confess to being a little surprised by that myself. I've suggested before that we've worked real hard at making a very efficient building. It would be difficult to find places to reduce the square footage significantly without cutting into the program. But we sharpened our pencil and looked hard and found some things. So that's kind of the context in which we work. Meanwhile, we have, the town actually has engaged Matt Kennedy at ECS to do the Phase 1 environmental study, so we'll speak to that. And then Nathan Jacobs and Associates with Wade Thomas doing some of our survey work, civil engineering sort of preliminary work, and both have been helpful in providing data which has now been folded into the cost estimate. And provides the basis for what we have this evening to talk about. And Wade, we'll get back to you in a moment. There are significant site costs associated with this project and at this particular site, and I'd love to have you comment on those in some detail, and if it's possible for you to stay a little bit after your presentation, maybe we can get into that in more detail. But let's start with Matt and have you comment on your report.
Hello everyone, I'm Matthew Kennedy. I'm a licensed environmental professional. I work for Environmental Compliance Services in Branford. We were hired by the town committee to do a phase 1 environmental site assessment. I don't know how familiar everyone here this evening is with the phase 1 environmental site assessment process, but it is exactly what it says. Phase 1. It's does not involve any analysis or laboratory testing. The phase 1 that we performed on this property consists of several elements. There's historical research, a site inspection, interviews with knowledgeable parties, review of regulatory information regarding oil and chemical spills, all types of hazardous waste type issues, look both at the property and adjacent areas. None of which is is shocking or concerning or representative of what I would consider to be a big environmental risk or a costly item. So I'm probably taking too much time for something that's not a costly item. In general, findings were good. So that should be good news for everybody here. Probably not too surprising. With an agricultural property, the state's expectation is that typically if you have soil that is impacted, it can quite often just be mixed with other soil on the property until whatever is in the soil is at such a low enough level where it can be reused on the property. That is usually done concurrent with development, and soils are sampled ahead of time, so there'd be some limited evaluation, obviously a representative evaluation ahead of time where there was actual soil samples collected and evaluated, and then during development. So it would be stockpiled, cuts and fills would be evaluated on a spot basis as things go, and there's a degree of mixing that would be inherent in that work. And any soils that were even remotely higher in levels from this historic, any of these compounds from this historic use, the state guidance says that those soils can be used, or kind of a best management practice would be to use those soils underneath buildings or beneath paved areas or beneath topsoil, and therefore essentially mitigating any kind of risk associated with agricultural properties.
So we're good?
We're good.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it, Jerry. Sorry, I talked into that. There's probably not that many words in this entire document.
So we have a modest allowance in our cost estimate for some special measures involving soils mitigation. For the most part, as Matt says, it's managed on site, not a significant factor.
No, but all good.
Okay. So we're good until we get a referendum passed, and then we take more tests after that. Is that correct?
And we can talk a little bit further with Matt about his recommendations for some phase 2 work, which is actually some on-site testing. Yeah. And there's a sort of a risk assessment judgment that would have to be made by the building committee in consultation with everybody. But I've not seen the report myself. So we've talked on the phone, but so there's a final analysis that needs to be made about the final.
Thank you.
So Wade, do you want to pick up one?
All right, basically what we have here, we evaluate the site for wastewater disposal. That's probably the single biggest item with respect to cost, site development costs, and that sort of thing. Basically what we have on the parcel has very good hydraulic capacity, but the contribution area, flush it back for a minute. If you're below 5,000 gallons, you go into the Connecticut Public Health Code. If you're above 5,000 gallons, you have to go to the Connecticut DEP, which is a whole different ballgame with respect to design and cost. So what we have today, I just got water monitoring data. It looks like we got about a long-term average during the winter of about 4,300 gallons. The problem is during the summer you have irrigation water and domestic water, no separation, so we can't separate it. So I had to look at the winter water use to arrive at numbers. Now, if you look at the public health code numbers, you come up with a flow of 10,100 gallons a day. And basically, we've had a lot of experience in schools where it's significantly less than that. You know, at 4,300 gallons, we're looking at quite a bit lower. Now, typically what they do is they look at a peaking factor. If we go over 5,000, then we're in their jurisdiction. Now, at that point, you have, the major pollutant of concern becomes nitrogen. You have to dilute it to 10 milligrams per liter at a point of concern. The point of concern in this instance would be the Indian River down gradient ends. So, this is the site plan without the so basically what we are looking at the evaluation is the western parcel here. Here's the eastern parcel, which is lower line, and the Joel School over here. What we are looking at, we put in 6 borings to date, 2 here, 2 here, and 2 here. We've installed 5 groundwater monitoring wells. The soils look good from the standpoint of wastewater disposal. But getting back to the nitrogen issue, you have to have a sufficient area to dilute it to 10 milligrams per liter. And basically, our divide is just west of 81, and at 4,300 gallons a day, we can't get below 10 milligrams per liter. I'm currently discussing options with the DEP. If we have to go that route, can I take advantage of this acreage on the east side of the river and apply that for dilution on this side? If we can do that, we're fine. But they may not agree with it, because they may say there's not really mixing, but from a practical standpoint, if you have a system here, it will mix, but I'm investigating that. Alternately, if that doesn't work, we could look at perhaps collecting stormwater and after the impervious surfaces and diluting the groundwater. At this point, I'm diluting the wastewater. At this point, we haven't had time to look at it, but that's an option. But the bottom line is, if we have to go to wastewater treatment, we can't get this to work, you're looking at about $1.5 million for a wastewater treatment plant and denitrification. And then with that, you're probably looking at somewhere from $70,000 to $80,000 a year in annual operating cost. So that's a very large number, obviously. We're trying to avoid it, but I haven't had enough chance to look at the data. I will look at it, and I'm going to exhaust all avenues so we don't have to go to the wastewater treatment option. We can get daily, we're now recording daily readings. If we can get it below 5,000, we can use those readings with the public health code, but they require 50% reserve, and it's just we're working through it. So that if we cannot get the nitrogen issue resolved by dilution, either on site, the other site, or stormwater, then we would have to go to wastewater pretreatment. And at that point, we would just discharge here, and it would meet all water quality standards at that point. So that's the largest item there. The next item is the water main. The water main currently ends on the north leg of Walnut Hill Road, which is approximately 2,300 feet from the site to the center of this residential portion here. We've gone through, because of the fact it's within Connecticut Route 81, it's a state highway, your cost involved with traffic control and their requirements is very costly, to conform to. And for that item, we've budgeted $1 million. That's probably conservative. I want to give you conservative numbers with some room in it, as opposed to cut it to the bone and come in later and say we didn't budget enough.
It escalated through a number of things. There's contingencies and various other owner's contingencies, construction contingencies, design contingencies get added to it, escalation over a period of time, bonding costs. So other things contribute. So when you start with a high number, they grow proportionally with the inclusion of those other things. 2 other site costs not really included in Wade's purview here is obviously the site acquisition. That's a special number unique to this property. And then we have a general site development cost, which is essentially the costs associated with building the parking lots and the sidewalks and the play fields and making some improvements to the crossing of the river. We've had some discussions previously about how ambitious to be on that. In consultation with Wade and others, we've concluded that there's really no reason why it can't remain as it is, more or less. We would make some improvements to it, obviously, but the pipe culvert and the sort of a land bridge, if you want to call it that, would remain. We treat that as a means of getting emergency vehicles to the playfield side, perhaps with bollards set up in such a way that routinely vehicles would not be crossing the river there. But, so that doesn't represent any kind of a special cost here, at least not as it's currently considered part of the design.
So what would you conservatively estimate? I mean, the big number here clearly is wastewater management.
I would say when we finish, we've got one more day of boring scheduled next week. The boring contractor has been relatively unavailable on the projects. So we'll be doing the north portion. I think it looks pretty promising. And I hope to get, and once I go through the water use data, get a better handle and look through the daily water use data, getting the daily readings now. Hopefully I'll arrive at a flow and I can run everything by them. I'm going to try to do that in the next 2 weeks. But the time period we've had here,
Sure, understood. And last question for me, in a structural capacity, do you see anything about this site that presents an issue? And setting aside the wastewater and utilities, what have you, but as far as foundations and base.
we don't typically do building geotechnical, but I would think the soils are ideal for the intended use. The 4,300 is being used to generate wastewater in the building.
In the building?
Yes.
On that side of the property, most of the irrigation would be on the opposite side of the river. Why wouldn't that be included in the, wouldn't that be an easy sell? Maybe, there may be something I'm missing here, but if most of the irrigation in the plan is on the opposite side of the river, why wouldn't they include that land as part of the wastewater disposal, is my question.
Oh, you're talking?
Because most of the irrigation, I assume, would be on the athletic fields.
That's correct. Well, that's the present mortgage school, yes. It would be on the athletic fields, that's correct.
At the new site. At the new site.
Well,
We can't guess how much water is going to come out of the new building. Or are you
the water use, I mean, we can guess.
Yeah, you're using that.
But guessing and having DEP agree with it's a whole different ballgame. You know? I mean, we can go through, flow use estimates based on the fixture counts and that sort of thing. But we're gonna go at the long-term water use data of the existing school, irrespective of the fact that we're gonna have low-flow fixtures here. And basically what I've done is I've tried to get the flow as low as possible by using the winter numbers for the daily flow. Does that answer your question? Or?
So right now, in our cost estimate that we're gonna hear pretty soon, you've included the expense of a waste treatment plant.
And the intended annual cost.
When will we know?
The attended cost is not in the cost estimate.
Understood.
When will we know for sure whether we'll have to use that waste treatment plant or whether we can dispose of
Basis in a few weeks.
I'm hoping in 2 to 3 weeks, as soon as I can, I want to sit down and meet with them and go over everything so everything's clear, because sometimes with the DEP, talk to them on the phone, they change later. And I want to make sure that everyone's on the same page.
I understand it depends on the size of the main running up Glenwood Road, but is it feasible to bring our utilities from, say, that Glenwood Road water main
It
across
is
the property,
possible. When I get
across the river
Yes,
as
yeah,
well?
yep.
So that
The
does-
gas you cannot do. The gas, they will not cross the river. The gas has to come up.
Does that change our price on the gas?
Well, I assume
Running.
it's coming up 81. There's no other option on
Right,
that.
okay.
Okay, yeah.
I thought
But
maybe
the
the gas
water
and
can
water.
go over the river, that's no problem. You just put trace tapes so it doesn't freeze and that sort of thing.
Does the gas and the water go in the same trench, or is
Yeah.
it separate,
No.
completely different?
You may
So
be
the
able
cost
to- they
estimate
can't
for the gas
possibly
is
use the same
separate
hole.
Right.
from the water?
Right, basically you gotta have to have 6-foot separation minimum between the water main and the gas main. because you don't want the water main blowing up and tearing up the gas main, basically. And if we look at 81, by the time you do that, we're destroying the whole lane and the costs are going way up there.
You may be able to work with the other gas company like we did when they did the Joel addition.
Right,
They brought it from Elliott up to Joel for nothing, because we guaranteed that we were
right.
gonna use gas at Joel.
And that number would be assuming, the gas number's assuming you pay full freight. The gas company said they'll go through an analysis, and you're probably gonna only pay part of it.
Right. That
But
might
I'm
be-
just giving you a number that,
That's the
it's the worst case scenario.
So there's two considerations with the water. It'd be a lot less expensive
Yes.
maybe across
Yeah.
the property from Glenwood Road, if that's
Absolutely.
feasible.
Absolutely.
And there may be an opportunity maybe for the water company as well to help us with the installation of that, or is that not an option as well?
They typically wouldn't
Won't do
have
that.
that.
Because
Kind of finding a way that works with them, you know?
they're gonna be probably using that main
Between water and gas.
to serve other areas, though,
Yeah.
wouldn't they? Once
You
they
would
break
think
up
so,
that-
but no, basically you pay full freight.
Okay.
So wait, and I don't mean to pin you down, you may not want to hazard a guess here, but just so we understand the potential benefit to our estimate. Worst case scenario, wastewater treatment plant 1.5. Best case scenario, if everything breaks in our favor?
If you have a public health code system, you're probably looking at probably 200,000.
So round numbers, let's say.
Maybe
$1 million
250,000.
And no maintenance costs or no operating
Right.
costs.
Right. Basically a conventional system. That's why I say I'm gonna look at, if I can, utilizing stormwater infiltration and see if they'll buy that for dilution. Because we can take the roof water, store it underground, or else slowly leach it out. Some other schools have done it. I think Guilford has done it, where they've actually diluted the nitrogen in the wastewater with stormwater through infiltration. And we can obviously investigate that.
Good. Okay.
Thanks, Bill. So let me just touch base again on, just remind you all on the premises on which the estimate we're about to hear are based, just go over some square footages and some of the details of the building. I'll remind you that the existing Morgan School building, and this is all in round numbers now, the so-called net area, meaning the area of the building exclusive of the perimeter, the thickness of the perimeter wall. So this is the number that the state's interested for reimbursement purposes. Excuse me, it's 154,000 square feet. The state, for a 601 student school, will, again, round numbers, reimburse you for a school of up to 112,000 square feet. Those are the two extremes. 154 is what you have, 112 is what they're going to reimburse you for at their normal full rate here. When you last saw the plans in December, that net square footage was at 136,000. And again, there was some feeling that we should sharpen our pencil and look harder at that, see if there are ways to save on square footage. We now have a scheme. I've not brought plans with us tonight because this is somewhat of a late-breaking development. But wanting to address this head-on, we looked at various ways to come up with to save some square footage, and we chopped that down. The 136,000 is now down at 127,000 square feet. So another way to look at that is we've got an existing Morgan School of 154,000 square feet serving a student population with capacity to handle 600 students and a 700-plus seat auditorium and 2 gyms and all of its associated facilities. Our new school is at 127,000 square feet. In other words, we've knocked out about 27,000 square feet, largely in just the efficiency of the plan. The auditorium's a little bit smaller. The total net square foot, or gross square footage of the 2 gyms is a little bit smaller, but we do have 2 gyms and we have a significantly oversized auditorium, both of which will obviously contribute to your so-called space penalty. I think we've made some real good progress on that. The bottom line in all this is I want you all to be fully aware of the fact that the building that we've designed, there's nothing extraordinary about it, nothing extraordinary in an irresponsible way. It's being proposed as an appropriate building in terms of the nature of the materials that are selected. The mechanical systems are absolutely appropriate to the energy conservation features. It doesn't include special systems like an extensive array of solar collectors or the kinds of things that are typically hard to afford without support from things like the Connecticut Clean Energy and that sort of kind of thing. But nonetheless, it's It's a building, it's a brick building, properly insulated. The only special feature that we have on this building that would make it perhaps out of the ordinary is the provision of the sloped roofs, which are fairly extensive. And this is something we've spoken about at length, and there's broad support for. So it's got pitched roofs on a good 70% of the building, and they're covered with at least to the purposes of the cost estimate here, a mill finish standing seam aluminum roof. And so there are costs not only in the selection of the material itself, but also in providing the structure that makes the sloped roofs possible. And there's probably well over $1 million of additional cost associated with that item. Apart from that, this is really quite, again, I don't want to suggest that it is in any way inferior construction or even for that matter, just kind of ordinary. But it's quite responsible, quite appropriate, mainstream for what's being done today with regard to energy conservation. Show you the one that we developed earlier. So this was sort of for a generic, this was actually developed at a time in which, before the Clinton Nurseries properties was even in the mix. But we were thinking of just addressing an undeveloped piece of property of roughly this size. We were anticipating there'd be a major road, much like Killingworth Turnpike here, and we started developing our ideas for the internal organization of the building at that time, which have remained pretty much as you see them here in our current scheme today. It anticipated there'd be an entrance drive in here, there'd be parking lots on either side. As this became fit into our understanding of the Clinton Nurseries property, we imagined the river being here, the passage across the river over to the play fields in this area, but the building fundamentally oriented along this axis, right? So there's a principal entrance here, and then there were secondary entrances from both parking lots on either side here. So as we got the more detailed site information from Wade's people, and we overlaid that plan on it, we found that there was more wisdom in rotating the building 90 degrees to that. So the internal plan organization that you're all familiar with from our previous presentations is still intact in that fashion. However, it's been turned 90 degrees relative to Killingworth Turnpike. So here's the main road right in here. And again, everything now drawn on a more accurate survey plan that properly reflects the true background of the property. There are 3 entrances off Killingworth Turnpike. The main one obviously in the center, with a significant vehicular loop around the front that provides ample area for visitors and buses, and with very broad turning radiuses to accommodate the larger vehicles. So there's a means on and off the site from this point. One can peel off into a parking lot to the south, alternatively to a smaller parking lot to the north down in this area. What you're not seeing on this plan are all the contours and some of the rock obstructions that Wade spoke of that have some impact on the developability of these areas. But the school proper located here. We have provided a placeholder really for, and this is only one possible approach to the maintenance facility, as a separate building. It would be located essentially opposite the school off of the main turnaround here. This would essentially function as a garage and the shop space associated with facilities. And then in turn, we've also provided some square footage here for the technology hub currently located at the Morgan School, given some square footage to that, and asked that to be included in our cost estimate. It's not folded into the number for the school itself, but it's identified in the bottom of the estimate here as being a separate cost, which is obviously part of the whole effort. So that's one approach to it. We got interested in the ways in which these things could actually work with each other towards to benefit the site plan as a whole. Maybe even the garage can begin to support some of the programs that are going on in connection with the STEM program, and even be space to support some of the auto shop work that's being done there. But should it be decided that no, this is too prominent a location, maybe the building wants to be someplace else, maybe it wants to be not on the property, maybe the technology hub wants to be in the building, all of those things remain options. But this is the most ambitious way of proposing it at this point. Again, this is I'd mentioned the existing so-called land bridge that spans the river would be maintained here, so there'd be a means of traversing the river and getting out to the playfield area here. We've laid it out with some minimal number of playfields here, haven't gone to a great extent at working that in enormous detail here, but it seems apparent that there should be adequate space to provide for your facility. So we've got tennis courts, baseball, softball, lacrosse, soccer, tennis, basketball courts, that sort of thing, is accounted for. Again, now this is the designated perimeter of the property, better known than it was before, and of course here's the football complex across the way. It's quite nearby. So that's a general summary of where we are in terms of the design and the investigation done before the estimate, and I'll turn it over to Bob to get into the actual numbers.
Can I ask you why you reconfigured on that property?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't make that clear. So there are wetlands limitations that one sees the end of the edge of the river here. Wade's folks did some investigation of the setbacks on the wetlands, and they take establish a setback in such a way that the geometry of the building lent itself better to this rotation than it did in the other orientation. Having said that, one of the ways in which we made this building smaller is to reduce its overall length by, I believe it was 12 feet. So at one time it was a little bit longer in this direction. Now as we begin to compact it, as it becomes more square, there is a better possibility of revisiting that. However, you can see the front yard setback to the road here would not be adequate to provide the kind of vehicular drop-off I've showed you on that earlier plan. It would be a little bit like what you have right now, which is so terribly unfortunate, with the building right hugging the road. What this allows is a very ample space to control all the vehicular traffic and distribute it properly to the various places without getting into the congestion that occurs.
Just approximately, how far is that school from the main road by your drawing there?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably in the neighborhood of, let's see.
How big is the tennis court?
Yeah, so it's probably about 80 feet or so.
80 feet?
Right.
What's our school presently from the road? 80? There's no? I mean, it doesn't look like it's much set back off from the road than where it was down the street.
Oh, but your experience of it will be entirely different. I mean, the whole entry, everything is really built off this elevation, not off this. And the development of this elevation, I mean, again, we consider that to be a very handsome feature. It would only provide some benefit. You can see, here's a house that exists down here, so we're kind of respecting the kind of setbacks that already exist on the property. I feel confident that over time, if that's something that we could develop to the point we could make you comfortable with that. By the way, let me also mention, this site plan presumes that the residential property here becomes part of the mix here. And you can see by the available area, as a simple matter of square footage, perhaps you don't need that property associated with that residence to make all this work. Having said that, it's right in the middle of the overall property, and it would seem to be in everybody's best interest to imagine a day when you have the entirety of this, including that residential piece.
Okay, I'm still shuddering a little over the earlier number about roofing costs, so that's why I'm thinking, okay, supposing it's, as you envision the building from the exterior at any given point is in fact a gable roof, yet the whole thing in the middle is EPDM, would that still allow for appropriate drainage, skylights, and accessibility as needed?
Well, there is an alternative.
And if I'm being way premature, say so.
Well, it's a little premature. I mean, there are changes that can be made to the design to eliminate some of the pitched roof that you see in here with no aesthetic effect on what you see from the perimeter. So one can easily imagine this is more like the sort of mansard approach, you know. Mm-hmm. So one has a pitched roof here, all around the perimeter, and it rises up to this peak, and then just drops down a short distance, and then we have flat EPDM roofs over a much larger area. So, and effectively are eliminating the sloped roof on the interior side that you never see. And yes, there would be some cost savings associated with that, both primarily in the nature of the roofing material. The structure, of course, you'd still have some sloping steel and other things associated with it. I think in the scheme of things that we're talking about, changes, you know, a couple $100,000 or so.
Can we find 12, 15 of those when we really come somewhere? Okay, thank you.
You want to continue this at another date, is that?
Doesn't change the facts. The estimate that I'm gonna hand out is a conceptual estimate based on all the information from David in his narrative, as well as many, many conversations back and forth between he and our senior Connecticut estimator, Peter Adamovich. This estimate was received by David and I yesterday. It's gone through a couple of edits since then. So I have not had a chance to go through every single line contained in it. But it does, I believe, capture everything that we need to capture. The front page is an executive summary of all of the costs, the total project, the bottom total project cost. Page 2 is a summary of the building elements, as David has described, and the next 24 or so pages are detailed lines. Contained in this, you'll see at the top building area is 135,000 square feet, as opposed to the areas that David works with and the Bureau of School Facilities work with. Those are interior areas. Those are the numbers that school facilities in their space program allow the district to build based on the student enrollment. Or when you build the building, you have to build the entire building, the entire footprint, which includes the thickness of the exterior wall, so it's actually a little larger. So there's two different numbers you may hear, so don't get confused. Net square feet is the space inside, gross square feet is the entire footprint that we have to build, so we have to allow for that.
And one postscript to that, the so-called roof terrace, you know, there's a courtyard at that upper level that we open out to. In Bob's numbers, that's carried at 50% of what it actually is. So it's a 3,000 square foot courtyard, and the gross square footage is counted as 1,500, and the net square footage is counted at 0. The state doesn't penalize you for building an open courtyard, but you still have to buy it and pay for it. It's less expensive than covered, heated, fully conditioned building, but it has a cost. So, sorry about that.
All right. Given that this is a concept estimate, there is a design contingency of 7%, which is an allowance for the evolution of a design as it goes through the various stages. There's a construction contingency, which is something that is given to the construction manager to manage the construction of the project for unknowns that come up during that course. And there's an owner's contingency of 4.5% at the bottom. That's monies that the owner retains for things you might want to add or other unknowns that come up during the course of construction that were perhaps unknown to anyone, substantial rock excavation, for example. There's also 2 lines in here for escalation. One line takes it out to 2014, the other line takes it out to 2015. I'll just briefly explain why that is. If the district were to file with the state for approval of this project in 2012, the state legislature would approve it in 2013. At that time, you would hire the architect. He would take about a year to design the project, several months of approval from the state, and then you would go out to bid you'd hire the architect in 2013, it would take you to 2014, you'd get approvals in late 2014, you out to bid in early 2015. That means you're bearing the brunt of an extra year of escalation. The district can choose to take on the risk of hiring an architect before the state legislature approves the project, which means if the referendum passes, you could hire the architect this year. The design will be ready not long after the state legislature approves it in 2013, and then you go out to bid 6 months or so later. So that would save you an entire year of escalation. As I mentioned, there is some risk to the district or the community because the state doesn't approve the project, you're bearing the cost of it. I've not seen where the state doesn't approve the project in that scenario. However, there's no reimbursement from the state while the design is going on. So those design costs have to be paid entirely by the district.
But they would be reimbursed.
They would be reimbursed upon approval. As David also mentioned, there's the maintenance building. That is a separate number at the bottom of this page. It's not embedded in the total school construction cost because that would not be reimbursed by the state, not being educational space. So we've kept it separate so you can see what its cost is. At the top of this page is the construction costs, and further down the page are all of the other ancillary soft costs and allowances. So now that you have it in hand, I can jump to the bottom of the page. The total project cost with all the contingencies, with all of the escalation, is in round numbers $68.5 million. That includes $7.2 million of site development costs, which Wade talked about earlier. Includes a $1.5 million wastewater treatment plant. It includes extending the utilities up to Route 81, both water and gas.
$3.7 million in site acquisition. And bonding costs. Bob, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, thank you, Dave. There's also in here almost $1 million in bonding costs, which is a guesstimate of what the town would pay to borrow the money. It would be Clinton's decision whether to carry that cost inside this budget and capitalize it, or not, carry it outside. Some communities go one way, some go the other way. If it were decided to carry it outside this project budget, then that can come right off the bottom line. So the cost of the building is a little bit higher than what we thought a year ago because it's a little bit larger. The cost of the building is a little bit more expensive on a per square foot basis because we're now approximately 16 months further down the road. And we've got escalation going out as well. And we've got the site acquisition cost. And we've got the site development cost of the new property. So those are all drivers that are impacting the bottom line.
With the bottom line, put it there for the moment, leave it there. How does that affect our case going in front of the state that we can build it cheaper than we can renovate as new high school?
I think it would be very difficult to make that case because of the site development cost, number one, and because the cost of building the new building, the cost of building new construction is more expensive per square foot than renovating. So I think we would have to presume for the moment, to be conservative, that the reimbursement rate would be at the 34%.
34% of this 68 million.
Yes.
Not counting the $1.3 million on the bottom for the maintenance shop.
That wouldn't be reimbursed.
That would not be reimbursed at all.
But having said that, I have to reiterate the caveat that there would be a space penalty here. Because the building is larger than the state allows for 600 students. So 34% would go down a little bit as we talk.
If we renovated to the present 154. If we were to renovate down to 127 or whatever, we would still could have a small same space penalty, we'd have none.
You'd have, correct. You'd do the same space.
Same thing.
Yes, sir.
But what's the reimbursement at renovation? Still 44%?
Yes.
So it don't look so bad right now renovating to new as it did a year ago.
Purely in dollars and cents, yes.
That's an honest answer. I like an honest answer. Thank you.
Would our renovate as new prices be any different than what we were looking at from the original Gilbane report?
Yes, everything has gone up because we're 16 months further out.
Also, I would just throw in that we've had the benefit of working with your educational staff for a year since the master plan was done. Our knowledge of your needs has grown enormously. And if that goes back on the table, the idea of renovate is new. It's obviously something we want to revisit in light of all that. So the master plan includes several different options for renovate is new, and large and small, it'd be useful exercise to go back and revisit that, even just from a design point of view. The state of the design for the new school, I feel very, very comfortable with. But again, the master plan was completed, we were authorized to proceed ahead with the concept design. We then proceeded, meeting with all of the educational staff and learning an enormous amount about how the school operates. We have a much better feel for it than we did at that time.
This would need to be fine-tuned. Clearly, it needs to be vetted line by line. I don't see any significant changes. We seem to have captured everything on the site and other ancillary costs. It is what I would characterize as a conservative number, which is what you would want if you have to go to referendum. If you're asking the voting public to approve a value for a project that's going to go out 2 years, you don't want to be caught $1 million short when you get to that 2-year point. You have to put a shovel in the ground. Then you have to go back and do referendum. So there is some conservative nature in this. Obviously, any monies that are unspent are unspent. I already said this.
We won't know what those are until the project is
Take
complete.
the darts.
Or we complete some design. I don't know, probably not a good time to ask this question, but it has to do with the old school where it's located now. And you're talking about septic, possibly having to build a separate septic system for the new school. Do we have the same concerns about the existing school in the future?
I'm not sure how the state would view that, as far as, I can certainly find out, as far as, if you're talking remodeling or reconstruction,
Right.
they may require you to, construct a code conforming septic system at that time. So that could well be a cost that you're gonna have to, and actually it's probably gonna be cheaper because you'd be able to go to the ground on the new structure, whereas the old, you'd have to go back and retest it. And my gut feel is there's probably a fair amount of, I don't know, but filled wetlands and that sort of thing in that area.
You expressed those concerns
Yes.
to us in an earlier meeting, that we probably have more problems with septic on the
Right.
old site than,
Yes.
than on this new
Yes.
site.
Jerry, your question relates to renovating existing one, not a new school on the existing
No,
one
no,
site.
no. I mean, I don't know, that's something to maybe just run by, how our committee feels about that. The original concept was to put a new school on the existing site.
Right. What he's saying is it could cause as much problems, if not more, septic-wise, wastewater-wise, and whatever.
Yeah, because if
For a
they
new
need to
building.
construct a new.
For a new building.
Right.
Wait, if we did a new building on the existing site, I presume the DEP is gonna hold us to the current applicable standard. There's no grandfathering.
That's correct, and I would think that
So we have a wastewater
they make you
treatment.
do that even if you're remodeling.
If we're renovating the
So
existing.
even if we renovate to new, they may also.
They may make you do a code compliant
New
system,
standards.
which, based on what I've seen, you'd have to get into a fill leaching system, which is gonna be a big number.
So bigger than 1.5.
Oh, no, I'm talking, yes, if you had to go with wastewater treatment, I haven't had a chance to look at the nitrogen dilution, there may be sufficient area for nitrogen dilution in this instance. But if there is not, and you have to go to a wastewater treatment plant, there would be additional cost of the leaching system because you won't be using existing ground.
Mhm.
So,
So basically, the wastewater problem is a problem,
Doesn't go away.
no matter where
That's
it's
right.
right.
Yeah.
we're gonna have problems either site
Exactly.
eventually.
Well, you're not gonna have problems, you're gonna have expenses.
Bob, the spirit of renovate is new. It would say to you that if it's required of a new building, it would be required of our renovated building. A DEP mandated matter is treated a little differently, I would presume, than a building code matter. The DEP approved it in its current form without going with a wastewater treatment plant. It's unlikely Department of Education would.
They defer to DEP.
Yeah, they would defer.
And the escalation for that last year is 1.6 million. And if we can do without a septic treatment plant, that's another $1 million, so
And a half, yeah.
$1.5 million. Dennis is gonna have to recover, I think.
Recovery wagon outside.
I do have a question for Wade. You mentioned rock on the site.
Yes.
This estimate is on page 3 does not include rock excavation because it's completely unknown.
Right, understood. I think, we'll finish the borings, we'll give you a better feeling. I mean, right now, we're looking at probably, the shallowest is probably about 12 feet rock, which I'm not sure where the basement floor is, but
12 feet. And you mentioned, you pointed to where your borings were, and they're mostly on the southern end.
that's southern end, right?
Yeah. The north is where you see most of those rock out.
Well, there's also, if you look at the residence to the south, there's bedrock outcrops between the house and the property line. So you got outcrops in both areas there, so.
I would make sure that we know what we're talking about there. Only because we built a little further up the road and we ran into a lot of unexpected rock.
Yeah, I mean,
And money to excavate it and grind it up or do whatever we had to do with it, so.
I mean, if this moves forward, or you may want to do it now, I mean, you could do probes on a 100-foot grid, that'll give you a better handle, but, I've been in projects where we had an athletic field, we did 220 probes on probably about 10 acres, and we still had 4,500 cubic yards of rock that we did figure it, because there's a big spine running between the borings.
Yes, you just don't know,
Right. So you can never have too much information
No.
in both ways.
particularly in that area, as you know,
Right.
Wade.
Yep.
That is a very unpredictable area. That's why they call it Rocky Ledge Road.
Have you had any luck talking with the state about how they're going to decide whether this would qualify for the full reimbursement or the lowered reimbursement?
Not substantive enough that I can relate to you.
So again, we had this discussion at the last meeting. Moving forward, if we go to referendum, we're really not going to know until we actually file paperwork with the state at the completion of the project, then, right?
Essentially.
That's it, right?
So my recollection is at the last meeting, we pretty much agreed that we need to be conservative and presume the project is going to be at the 34% reimbursement rate. I think given this conceptual estimate, it's going to be even more difficult to prove that this is less expensive than renovate.
And they include all the site work. I mean, that's a lot of this cost estimate is the site work that has to be
Yes,
done. The site acquisition
they look
costs,
at-
they would count that in when they
Yes,
evaluate
But-
building new versus renovated.
that's what's driving this into more expensive.
And first of all, let me say, I appreciate the honesty in this report.
Yes, I do. I want to say that also.
It's very thorough, and I just like that we have every number out there. But if we were to get, because now we kind of have, I think a lot of our heads are turning, what number would you see? We played with all those numbers about square footage of renovate and build new. If you could just give me a range of a number you would use for renovate a building, because this number is much higher than it was, 12, 18 months ago.
But you're looking at the bottom total line cost, which has all the contingencies and escalations, and where you want to compare to make sure you're apples and apples, is the top line cost construction trades. So that's at $300 a square foot for new.
Okay.
Renovate could be, it's going to have to be a broad range because it depends on the existing structure and how much renovation you do. Like heavy renovate, like there is generally considered to be heavy renovation. But it could be as much as $280 per square foot.
Will that include environmental contingencies, special
Just no, it would not.
and that'll probably be covered most likely.
Yes, yeah, good point, the renovation of existing building is going to have a significant amount of environmental investigation and more than likely with the age of the growing school or environmental damage. That could be several million dollars.
Any of these numbers include sport field development?
I don't think so, because the sport fields are across the river.
Well,
Oh, yeah, but they're part of the high school.
no,
I can't find them, but
There-
there is landscaping, but
there's
it
a,
doesn't from the numbers.
it's in the, well, you know, Peter and I did talk about that.
I know.
I know it's on his spreadsheet somewhere.
I'll research that. What's that? Oh, I think you was on yours.
We have to wait for Wade to get back to us with some information. It's gonna take you about 2 weeks.
Maybe 3, no more than that. Maybe so.
We're all counting on that.
That will give our committee a little bit of time to go through this document. I think we have to keep in mind some of the advantages involved in moving the location. And that's not in this report as to what the value of that property would be, that we would be selling when we move the school off of that. I know this number is not something that we were looking forward to seeing, but it is what it is. And I think Bob explained to me a little bit of problems some other communities run into when they lower the price artificially to try and get something passed, and then they end up looking for extra money from the town, and we definitely don't want to be in that situation. We've heard from Wade, and we've heard from David, and we've heard from Bob that these are conservative numbers, meaning we should be okay if we go with those. But it seems like there's some savings that we could possibly make. I'd also like to find out what the actual town share would be. If we can come up with those numbers or an estimate of what those numbers could be.
Town share of dollars.
What the town share would be. I think we ought to talk as a committee or discuss maybe with our town leaders whether they would be comfortable moving ahead if the referendum were passed for this project and hiring an architect prior to getting state approval. That's almost a $2 million savings right there.
Conceptually.
Potential.
Conceptually.
Conceptual.
Gross.
So there's a lot of stuff to go over. All right. When would you suggest that we meet again so that you can come back to us and tell us that we're going to be able to do without a septic?
When's your next regularly scheduled meeting?
We haven't scheduled one yet. So do you want us to be 3 weeks out?
Yeah.
You want to have a meeting first?
I think we need a meeting.
Yeah, you know, a million here, a million there. Let's have a meeting.
Before we get word back.
Yeah.
Wait.
You know,
Well, just a goal.
All right.
yes, sir.
Let's look at the following Tuesday then. Would that be?
Poop.
Well, we got board.
Following
finance.
Tuesday?
All right.
No, that's okay. You mean next Tuesday?
The 24th of January.
Yeah, I don't think we don't start budgets until February, right? We good on that? Okay.
Great.
Sounds good to me.
Bob? You okay with that? Okay.
Jerry, January
January 24th.
24.
my schedule, hoping for better news this evening, said that over the next 3 weeks, we would be focusing on our concept design presentation package. So that, and we have plenty to do to make that happen. I'm reluctant to pull the trigger on it right now, because we want that presentation to accurately reflect what ultimately the committee decides to move forward with. So my only, there's no question that we need to answer here right now, we just need to be cognizant of the fact that once a direction is established,
Every week we delay town meeting to go ahead with this, is another week that this pushes out the referendum. I don't think we want to discuss that right now, do we? I mean, I get the
If you want my
feeling,
input.
I get the feeling that we want to ask some more questions first.
fair enough.
And we'll mull this over.
From that right now.
I'm basically just letting you know that we won't begin the process of
We
preparing
understand.
a presentation until we're confident we've got something you all are comfortable
Good
with.
idea. So 7 o'clock next Tuesday.
7 o'clock next Tuesday. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?